Hi everybody, I am so glad to see you all here on my Patreon and Nebula exclusive review of Soul. I realized a lot of people like my opinions on movies and TV shows, and I find that in terms of writing a video essay, it's much easier to do so after the entire series has come out. But I have thoughts in the in-between, and with movies, not every movie I necessarily want to be part of a whole intensive discourse, so I figured why not bring it to y'all. So this will be the first of, because I was late this month, 3 exclusive pieces of content that will be only available on Patreon and Nebula for the foreseeable future. So I hope you enjoy, and here we are to talk about Soul. Before I finally sat down to watch Soul, I had some concerns once it was clear that our black leading man was going to be in sort of this weird human-ish glob form. I will say first of all that the design of the film really, outside of the actual human aesthetics, didn't really engage me. So I was a little concerned about that. And I saw a lot of mixed reviews about the film from black reviewers, specifically Charles Pullum from IO9, who I adore. He and I, we have different opinions on some things, but overall he's a great writer, so I enjoy reading his thoughts. And once I saw his review, I sort of had my feelers out for things. The film is directed by Pete Docter and co-directed by Kemp Powers, who became the first African American to direct a Pixar movie, which is a huge thing. And I want to say that in all of those things, I think that the film shows the growth of animation in terms of its ability to depict black people and other peoples of color. However, I think ultimately I found Soul largely unsatisfactory, and that isn't necessarily just because of the movie itself, but more so how the movie ties into larger issues of how black characters in animation have been treated. The first thing that I noticed about Soul, and I made sure to clock this in my watching, is that in 9 minutes and just under 30 seconds, he's not in his own body. And for the majority of the film, he will not be in his body. He will either be this blob form or he will be in the body of a cat. Both of those things really take away from the ability to really get your feelers into the blackness of this film. Despite the fact that I think that the film overall is trying to say and do good things, it's just really impossible to divorce it from the larger issues in mainstream animation. It was only in 2019 that we had Matthew H. Fury's Hair Love win an Oscar, and it was so lauded that people actually sat and watched Angry Birds 2 for it, which I'm like, y'all really doing the God's work for that, because even I, a notable Negro, an openly black, didn't do that. Let's talk about what Soul is about. Soul tells the story of Joe, a music teacher who wants to be a jazz musician. One day he is offered both a full-time job at the school he's been teaching at and a chance to perform with jazz legend Dorothea Williams at the same time. Of course. He auditions for Dorothea Williams, played by Angela Bassett, and is offered an opportunity to perform later that night. During his whole talking on the phone and not seeing where he's going, typical New Yorker behavior, I must say, he falls into a manhole and finds himself a soul heading towards the great beyond, aka he dead. And again, this is 9 minutes and 30 seconds in the movie. We're dead. So he decides to escape from death and ends up in the great before. And there, dead souls can mentor unborn souls for life. Each soul has a badge with traits. And once that whole badge with traits fills up, they can head to Earth. Joe ends up mentoring 22, a soul voiced by Tina Fey. Girl, who has not managed to find her spark yet. She and Joe team up to find their way to return Joe into his body, but in the process, a body switch happens, and Joe ends up in the body of a cat, and 22 ends up in Joe's body. This is like the second of many problematic things that will happen. But I think even if Joe had been in a soul form for majority of the movie and had these revelations, that would be one thing. But I think the body swap elevated it to another level of uncomfortable subtext, having it be this white woman, and I put white woman in air quotes because they explain in the film that technically 22 is not a person yet. That voice was just chosen because it was annoying.
By the way, why do you sound like a middle-aged white lady?
I don't. This is all an illusion.
Huh?
This whole place is a hypothetical.
I could sound like this if I wanted to.
Or sound like this instead.
I could even sound like you.
Life is so unfair. I don't want to die. Somebody call the ambulance.
I just use this voice because it annoys people.
It's very effective.
Telling on themselves in that regard, I must say. Now, for those of you wondering why this might be so complicated, it goes back to the roots of animation. Animation has a complicated history with blackness. Even Steamboat Mickey whistling us at the beginning of these Disney movies, Mickey is actually whistling a song inspired by the pre-Civil War minstrel tune Zip Coon or Turkey in the Straw. Many elements of animation today have roots in blackface and minstrel shows because it was the pop culture theater of its time, especially the glove thing. Like, the glove thing is absolutely an artifact of that period, to answer that question in an extremely goofy movie.
Do you ever wonder why we're always like wearing gloves?
Yeah, man.
In 2009, Princess Tiana became the first Black Disney princess and infamously spent the majority of her film, The Princess and the Frog, as a frog. What's more, the moral of her story felt like to me that it boiled down to a "you're working too hard" narrative that sort of washed over all the reasons why she was working so hard and had to do so. That has always stuck in my craw ever since. With Soul, Soul is officially the second Disney movie and first Pixar movie with a Black lead, and there are a lot of uncomfortable parallels between the two. They're not in their bodies for a majority of the film. White and non-Black characters completely overshadow and take over the narratives that they're supposed to be key in, and their dreams are not encouraged, which I think is sort of the biggest issue I have with Soul. And I know some people disagree with me on this point because I tweeted about it, but I feel like the movie spoke down to the passion that Joe had for jazz. You know, he is a Black artist in New York City who was inspired to be a jazz musician due to his father, who seems to have recently passed away. And I personally didn't get from what we saw of Joe that he wasn't living his life. He just seems to be a normal New York City Black man who is working a job, doing an artistic dream, and trying very hard to make it, which is any artist living in New York City trying to do something important will tell you that shit is hard. So this whole idea that he's wasting away and missing out on opportunities, I'm just like, I don't think he's missing out on opportunities. I think he's just trying to do the absolute best he can. I mean, come on, it's hard out in these streets. I think that he just was looking at a bigger picture, and it seems bitter to me that he was just about to get his big break and wanting to get back to his body, and that desire to finally achieve a dream was sort of seen as like doing too much. And for 22, for lack of a better word, a white person, a white blob, to walk around in the world with wonder and without care, without anxiety, is quite frankly a privileged mentality. It's a privileged mentality to be able to walk through the world like, la 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 la, you know, like, you know, they're a new soul. They haven't dealt with trauma. They haven't dealt with institutional racism. I'm like, you know, I find that to be the core of what I found disappointing about Soul as a product. Ultimately, as you know, Charles Pullman Moore put in his IO9 piece, it seems so much to be centering other things besides Blackness, and it even stands out even more so to me because I see that not being the case in other products. Like, I look at Coco, Moana, Mulan, Aladdin, and even the upcoming film Raya and the Last Dragon, and they seem invested into crafting these worlds that celebrate the culture that is being inspired for them. They are invested in making it a deep experience. You are embedded within that culture. Yet with Princess and the Frog and now Soul, there seems to be a lack of understanding that Black American culture, you know, has value and mythos and magic into itself, and it is worth, you know, insulating yourself into that, to really digging deep into the core of that and crafting engaging stories about it that don't have to do with just work. And while it may not be intentional, it's insulting. All of the Disney films that feature POC, there are still issues, but they're not being POC of those cultures behind the scenes fully, not getting the check, not getting the profits from that. Those are all big issues that we should recognize and point out. But I will say, as a viewer, just going from the aesthetics, is that when I watch Coco, I'm like, a bitch is in it, you know? I was talking to my friend, I was like, I've seen what you've done for others, Pixar, and I want mine. Like, Coco, to me, made me weep and cry, because it just felt so like the research was done. You know what I mean? They were like, we're gonna respectfully talk about this topic, so we gotta go in. And I wanted that for Soul. I wanted that. And apparently Soul was inspired by Pete Docter going through sort of an existential crisis after the massive financial and critical success of Inside Out. And it made him wonder if there was anything left for him to accomplish as a filmmaker, which is fine and absolutely fair narrative to explore. The thing about it is that he is a white man who has worked at Pixar since nearly the beginning, and has had several big hits. He was part of Up as well before Inside Out. So like, he is a massively successful man who has worked in his field and in his passion for his entire major career. That is totally different from being a black man struggling to be a jazz musician in New York City, having seen your family do this, to connect to jazz as a cultural expression of your artistry, and being so close to making it and always just cutting it short every time. That's completely different. And as well, Joe wasn't even black until Kemp Powers came on and decided to do that. I think before he was like a rock musician as well, and a white dude. I want my black media to be specific. I don't need to be authentic for every single black experience. No work should have that put on them, I feel personally. But I want to be celebrating blackness in this work. I want to be celebrating black culture, black aesthetics, and that means having the black character be the lead the whole time. And with 22, let me tell you, that's when I heard that Miss Tina Fey was playing 22, I was like, absolutely not. Okay, if a white woman is going to take over my body, it's not gonna be Miss Tina Fey. Okay, like if I was gonna let a white woman take over my body, we're talking Hayley Williams, Dolly Parton, Jane Fonda, Miss Celine Dion, Kelly Clarkson, maybe even Pink from her Can't Take Me Home era, but never, ever, ever, never, ever, 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 ever Tina Fey. Not Tina Fey, not Amy Schumer, nada. I would let Jenny Slate take over my body before I would let Tina Fey. With all the controversy surrounding her, and, you know, the black face of 30 Rock and so much of her cringe, weird, racialized humor, like, it's just a bad decision to make. Not because I dislike Tina Fey on a personal level. I do think that she has a capacity to change and to grow, etc., but who cares, you know, that's not what the point of it is. The point is that, like, that's a messy choice for the first Pixar movie to star a black leading character, okay? Like, y'all could have just seeked Amy and got Amy Poehler if you really needed a white female to get a check. And like other people said, it should have just been like Tracy Ellis Ross. There is absolutely no reason for it to be Tina Fey and have that added layer of problematicness to this narrative. Ultimately, I will say I don't think that Soul is a bad movie. It's like a mid-level Pixar movie to me. I think it's beautiful. The music is fantastic. I think the human animation is exceptional. I do like the Jerry and Terry characters. I think they're funny. But again, they're taking away from the core of what I want this movie to be like. I couldn't be satisfied with this film because it doesn't have that blackness rooted into the core of it. And without that, the film just could never work for me. And that's a personal thing. I don't think it's going to matter for every single person. I will say, and I know people shade Sarah Parker for this, but I also miss New York watching this movie. I was like, oh, I miss my messy subway. I miss my trash. I miss all of it. So again, the film is beautiful. The soundtrack is beautiful. I think that the intentions are there. I'm not going to doubt the intentions. The intentions are clearly there, but I would love for us to have Black American narratives and creative imaginary stories that focus on the culture the same way they can focus on other cultures. That's what I want to see. I want the Black people to be directing the films, to be getting that check, or at least be on the story writing perspective. The fact that that's been an oversight, not once, but twice, come on. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this review of Soul. So my next Nebula and Patreon exclusive will be about WandaVision. I am actually going to wait until I see the episode coming out on this Friday, and then I will post the video of my reaction and review of it on Monday on Patreon and Nebula. So I'm looking forward to that, and then we will have a special third video that is Black History Month themed and true crime themed all at once. So I look forward to sharing that with you guys. Thank you so much for joining me here on Nebula and on Patreon, and I will see you guys soon, and have a great day. And please let me know what you thought of Soul. I would love to hear other people's opinions. I mean, it is a gorgeous movie. My partner loved it. I can see why other people liked it, but I was just left wanting more.